Hey, good morning, guys, and welcome to another edition of Addressing Military Culture. I hope you guys have been having a wonderful week, and we just want to get the conversation started. We appreciate all of you guys that'll be tuning in live. Please drop in the comments where you're tuning in from, and join the discussion with us today because we're talking about something that's on the level of leadership that we always talk about. But we're talking about it in the military culture, and we're going to dive in a little bit today and ask the question is, how is the military supporting diversity and inclusion? From our perspective, all of us that's on here, we're from different diverse backgrounds, and we talk about different things differently. But the military kind of put things in a, so to speak, they paint it with a broad brush, right? It's kind of like their way to highway, or some of these kind of cliches that we've heard in the essence of dealing with the military. But we're just going to uncover a little bit, have a discussion about, and just talk about diversity and inclusion in the military. Do they support it? How they support it? Our experiences with it? What have we taken away from it? And what are some of the things that they might be doing or could take suggestions in doing in the days to come? And of course, I can't do this by myself. I got my great panel of military vets joining me. My man Charlson Gaines is in the house. What's up, Charlson? How you feel, man?
I'm good. I'm good. How you doing?
Good, man. Glad to see you. Glad to see you. And of course, I got my old school buddy, Mr. Jeff Clark. What's going on, Jeff? How you doing, man? And I
Good
got
man, how
my
are
man
you?
Alex. I got my man Alex. He's going to join us in today too. He can't stay with us all because Alex is working. He's working professional military. His time is precious, man. But how you guys doing today, man? I just want to just check in with you guys, do a round table, and kind of see how things is going with you. Charles, you kick us off, man. How's it going today?
Man, I'm good. I'm good. There's a lot of things going on, and I just feel like it's nice to be part of this group, this team, because in reality, man, all four of us are here to serve people. We're all here to bring our expertise, our knowledge, our experience, man. So I'm grateful to be here to be able to contribute. All right, you're muted, man.
Am I muted? I'm sitting up here talking in the meeting. I'm hearing the feed. I'm hearing the feedback, so I cut my mic off. So I guess it wasn't me. Alex, how you feeling this morning, buddy?
Hey, we're feeling great. We're feeling great. Had a little lag in the internet this morning, so I was able to get in. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we hear you good. I can hear you
Perfect.
good.
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. We're looking at leadership and management today with the students, so it's cool to be able to get on here and have a little talk and hear from some of the experts out here, be able to pull from all this knowledge. So we appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here, man. And we're just talking about the big question, Jeff, man. How you doing today, man? Get the round table in.
I'm good, man. Threw my headphones on. Maybe it'll help out with some of the feedback you got.
Ah, okay, yeah. I don't know if it was for me. I know I didn't change headphones about 4 or 5 times, but when you do as many shows as I do, they get to be a little wear and tear. I tried the big ones, man. I don't know. They work the best. Now I do have a pair that works very good, but they give me that kind of like sunk in. I don't know what the rest of the world doing kind of thing, and I get claustrophobic with it. Yeah, I'm a vulnerable dude. I don't have no problems. I get kind of like that. Hey, I told my son that once before. He's like, "Dad, you was an M1 tanker, man. You sat in those little bitty tanks." I was like, "Yeah, but I don't know. I didn't feel it then. I feel it now as I get
Yeah,
older. I don't
headphones
want to be."
shouldn't bother you.
Yeah, I know they should, right? That's what he said. I say, I'm not. I'm a little older now, so I don't like to be all tight and scrunched up, man. So yeah, but we're talking about the big question, man. Does military support diversity and inclusion? So I just want to get you guys take on that, man. And we kind of like discuss that. Maybe you guys got some examples of like, because I can give you some examples of how maybe wasn't so much as passed up, because we look at it from a standpoint of your rank and what you have to go through, and certain things that you have to pass and qualify. So it's not on the same level as corporate, where a lot of people kind of hopscotch qualifications or certifications or things of that nature where they get promoted, right? But there are some instances where, on the equal level, some soldiers have been of the same equality. as far as their numbers, their rankings, their certifications and things, but they haven't got those positions as their counterparts have. And I just want to kick it off with a little bit of discussion to know, is that happened to you guys, or have you seen that? And I guess we could go around and everybody could kind of weigh in on that. Charles, have you kind of seen that from a fairness point of view, where you've seen a brother of yours, a sister of yours, a minority, whatever the case may be, and it doesn't have to be a black white thing. It can be, because I've had some white counterparts as well, if I can say that, was kind of better, and someone else got it for the diversity part. I'm checking the box. You know what I'm saying? So I've seen it on both sides. So I just want to key in on that discussion, man, and see where we can take it. What you think, man?
Well, I mean, I'll say this: I saw a lot more racism when I joined. Back in 1994. Yeah, so there was a lot more then, and there's been a ton of progress since then. But it's kind of like I look at it like, when we talk about, like, say, sexual assault awareness or suicide awareness, it's like we have to move beyond the awareness and take action. So diversity and inclusion are two separate things. So as the diversity increases, the inclusion is still not always there. And I've seen a lot of that, where it's like, based on these numbers, we're a diverse organization, we're a diverse group, but who's included in the decision making? Who's included in the planning? And it doesn't even have to be like strategic plans or anything. It could be something like, what do we want to do for a calf day? What do we want to do for the wing picnic or something like that? And it's okay, the team is diverse, but not everyone's really included as a part of the process. And so a lot of that really has to be worked on internally, where people, if they understand these concepts better, then they could change it themselves, right? Because not everybody, I'll put it like this: a lot of times we think we're doing well, and we don't know any better. So you're not racist, you're not a bad person or whatever. You just don't grasp what's going on in the moment, and so you don't realize that. And so that happens at the staff and tech sergeant level, the sergeant first class level, or the captain level, where they're doing what they think is right. They think they're doing what they think is the best that they can do, but there needs to be more education and implementation as far as the inclusion. Whereas diversity without inclusion is really more about the numbers, the quantities, and inclusion is about the action.
Yeah, I get you. I get you on that, Alex. You're being so much hands on, and uh, so much in it, and now with the mentoring and the leadership work that you do. How is that? How are you seeing that to be cultivated, and not necessarily what you do particularly, but how do you see that as a culture of the military support? Because I kind of can piggyback a little bit off of what um, Charlson said, because we've always seen the diversity. I mean, when I came to basic training, oh my God, I had people from everywhere, all nationalities. I had a few people from different countries that was going through basic training with me. So the diversity was there, but I also saw such a pivotal point, and I joined the military in '85. So I saw some of the pivotal points of where we weren't included. There were, even though we were a diverse team, a lot of times we had a bunch of segregated groups of soldiers, hanging out with their own. And then, of course, we get all together when there's training or classes or that side. How you kind of cultivating that, or trying to shift that kind of mindset culture, and what you're doing?
So what I do is I take it a step further in
Mhm.
between diversity and inclusion, because having a diverse force or a diverse team is cool. Making sure that people have a seat at the table, they're included, but then asking the question, do they have equity? Do they have equity in what we're talking about? Because like the analogy that I use is, we have a big round table and we have 10 people there, you know, and for diversity, we're hitting all the marks, right? So all the people are included because they're around the table, they have a voice, but just because we give them a seat and a voice and a platform to use it doesn't mean that we're giving them equitable stake in what's going forward. So that's how I try to explain it to people, because diversity and inclusion sometimes can be used as a buzzword. And if we really focus on making sure that they have the equitable stake in the decision making or whatever it is that we're doing, then it changes the frame a little bit.
Yeah, it does that, and I do a lot of that. Jeff, and I'm gonna get you to weigh in on this also, man. I do a lot of that in what I teach and coach, and you guys know that I'm on the vulnerability coaching side, and I look at that from a point, and I do a lot of that, and I'm finding more so work in the avenue because when I first started this, I just really wanted corporate to kind of pick this up, right? So as I started talking and start going places and actually sharing my thoughts and being on people podcasts and shows, I've been getting hit a lot from the DEI community. So I can't even change my title on there, to be in the DEI space because that was important, but I didn't want to pinpoint that because I wanted everybody to kind of get that mindset of the vulnerability. But you said something that is really key and to why I think that is because we have been for so long a time had our eyes on the prize of actually checking those boxes, right? Because of what repercussions or things that could happen, to our organizations or corporations because we wasn't. And it's never came to that point, and that's why I changed my equation when I said I wrote a new equation and even wrote some work on it. Diversity plus vulnerability equals inclusion, and I kind of worked with that because the diversity part has already been fulfilled with us for low many years now. I mean, corporations have really been doing that, and they've really been bringing that to the mark and making sure we're colorful, that we got a lot of people from different areas coming in, and you've always had that inclusion, right? What I used to call the good old boys network, the click people, the managers who had their favorites. Those were the included ones, but they never got the diversity involved in what they were, and it was still always a separation. So I said, for us to do that and to mend that, somebody on both sides have had to be vulnerable enough to show some weak spots and say, yo, I don't know what goes on in your culture. I'm not really familiar. Just kind of help me out. And I think these are the things that we're really trying to move forward. What do you think about that, Jeff? And your leadership, and I'm so very glad we got leaders on here where we can have this conversation with men that is going to actually curate and kind of evoke these things in their doing, in their work, in their leadership, in their trainings, and things like that. So, Jeff, what are some of the things that you think that the military supports, and what are some of the things that you're training leaders in your neck of the woods, so to speak, of what they should be doing?
Well, I think we've done a really good job of checking the box, kind of like what Alex said, and a little bit of what Charlson said as well. Like, we've done a really good job of saying, hey, diversity and inclusion. Having the stake and the equity and the investment in it is a whole nother deal. As a leader, as I've been a leader as both military and as a civilian, my motto was always, I don't care who you are. I don't care where you're from. I need you to do your job. And, our best performers are our best performers. We're never stronger than our weakest link. So we have to pull everybody forward. It's not an option to segregate. It's not an option to have a good old boys club. It's not an option to have different chunks of the squadron or the unit. It's not an option. We are all one single team. And I think we've done a really good job as a military at saying things like that, but doing them has been different. I think we've been okay with checking the box when we promoted, a female to her third star, and we said it's the first 3-star general in the Air Force. And we've done a good job of patting ourselves on the back, but I don't think we've done a good job of saying why we promoted her. What the importance and the significance is, and we've just slapped a label on it and said first female 3-star. There it is. Well, why'd she get the job? Why did she deserve it? Tell us more. What has she done? And same thing with, General Brown. He was first African-American chief of staff of the Air Force, and they just slapped that label on there. Well, tell about his history. Tell about his career. Why did he deserve to be in that seat? He's not African-American General Brown. He's just General Brown, and he has a hell of a resume. and he absolutely deserves to be there. And I think we've done a bad job of doing that part of not justifying, but explaining and saying why we're diverse, not just saying we are.
Yeah, and you bring another another great point in, and you guys have all touched on great points, and especially what you're doing in the realm of that. But you put something on that I really want us to go to, because I really think it's important. A lot of times there needs to be, when we think about it, and me being an African American man and looking at it, everything is always pointed to by color first versus accomplishment, right? So when I started doing this, and I started came, and I even had a gentleman tell me, a white CEO tell me, when I did a workshop in Phoenix, Arizona over this past year for some CEOs there at the Chamber of Commerce, and this guy said, "Man," he was like, "I never heard nobody talk about vulnerability." He said, especially from a black leader. Now, the course of the conversation was, I mean, of course, I didn't take offense to that. I mean, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. It's the first time I've ever been. I don't know the culture. I don't know the dynamics. So it's not like I'm pointing fingers of blame, right? But I'm just saying, with the comfortability of him bringing that out in the conversation, talking, lets me know to where I was, and it also brought back to the fact that everything that I talked about, he didn't take it in from a grain of that this was good, great accomplishment information. He took it from a grain of, "Yeah, the black guy gave me this information," right? And I think you brought that to the head of, I've always been one that worked that I don't care uh, what your color is, hair color. I really never gave any of those things a second thought, because I always work with people based upon what people can produce. And I think that's, everybody don't see with that same lens, but I think that's the lens that we need to see with, and with the diversity and how we're doing that. A lot of the inclusion is being pushed away, and now it's becoming more so commercialized. Of course, we've had the issues with, the killings, the riots, the different things of that nature. So now it's sort of like it's being a pushed agenda instead of an authentic agenda. And this is really what I want to talk about with that. Why do you think that, with everything that's going on, we can kind of figure that out as to why it's being pushed? But why do you think it's so important that we don't actually get to the bottom of that, like you said, in the general? I think it's important not only that we understand his climb to where he's gotten, but I also think it's important to set that as a narrative, so someone coming behind him can make those same leaps and bounds. And regardless of whatever race they're from, there's a qualification metric that he passed. And someone else should have visual to that to see, this is what I got to do to get there. And I agree with you so much that we aren't doing that, man. So what can we do for the longer part of that? Thanks a lot, Alex. I know if you got to run, man, let me know. Just clock out. I mean, not clock out. It's not a job, but if you got to go, man, we appreciate you. We appreciate you hanging up, man. We know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate you coming, man. But what do you think about that? You guys can say with that, how are we working to be more inclusive in these areas, because we don't have a problem with the diversity thing. I mean, all three of you guys has hit that mark. What are we doing more so on the inclusive side to make sure that us as leaders are having this new type of workforce come in to be more inclusive to what's already there? Alex, I'll let you answer that since you're short on the time. Get go tag on that first if you want.
Let's see. So probably what I would do first is, we have everybody there. We'll just assume that we're doing that and we're working on a project. Um, First thing I would do is just look around the room and then just identify 1 to 2 people and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Which way should we go first? And hear from them first. Because leadership is about awareness too. So if you have those people that necessarily don't feel valued, you can ask them, hey, what do you guys think about this? Jot a couple of those notes down, and then once you get to the decision point, then you can bring those back up. So
Awesome, awesome, awesome. What you think about that, Charlson?
When I think about it, I really like to start from a more of a quantitative approach, right? So, a couple different tools that I would use. First thing I would use is there's this there's this implicit bias test produced by Harvard, and the truth is, a lot of people said there's a lot of flaws in it, which is true. but there just isn't a better tool out there. And really, that's really more about self-awareness. That's more about the emotional intelligence. If I take this test and it shows that I have an implicit bias against a certain group of people, then that lets me know that maybe I should fix something. That enables me to look at myself. I don't feel like I'm racist. I don't feel like I discriminate against these people, blah, blah, blah. But this test that I took online says that maybe I do. So let me look at myself. Let me challenge myself. So I think we need more of that, right? So it's just starting with the self-awareness. Um, and then there's another tool, and it's about 360 leadership. And I think we need more of that. And the 360 leadership tool, I don't think it's free. So the organization would have to pay for it, but it's where leaders get rated by 360 degrees. The lowest ranking person that works for you, the higher up the chain of command, people of the same rank as you, everyone's rating your leadership. And so when that happens, then you can get an honest look, like, okay, my coworkers, my peers, they think I'm a great leader, but a couple levels down, they think that I have favorites. All of my favorites look like this. All of my favorites, and it doesn't even have to be about race, right? All of my favorites are from the West Coast, or all of my favorites are around this age or whatever, right? And so 360 leadership that tool enables us to really look at the data. And then I could present that data to you. And then what you do is you apply your increased self-awareness to that so that you can take a look at yourself. Because a lot of this is really, it's on you. There's no measurement, right? Like on a performance report, there's no, section that says, how well did you apply diversity and inclusion? I think that would be ridiculous. But you need to be able to look at yourself like, hey, my last 3 teams were 95% this gender, this race, people from this area, whatever. Am I inclusive of the other people? So essentially, people need to use the data to check themselves.
Yeah, it seems like when we have these conversations, right, and we talk about them and the different aspects of the culture of what we talk about, uh, there's this great generality that that uh, the military aren't doing this, or they aren't doing that, or this needs to be highlighted, or that needs to be highlighted. And we definitely take in the frame of mind of thinking, or at least I do, that these are corporations that's been operating under such guidelines for such a long period of time that it's been ingrained, right? So all we know is us having, if we having habits, we know that it takes some time to reconstruct, rebuild, or even maybe tear those down and create new habits. So there's a lot of opportunity to make changes, but there's not, as you talked about, the quantity and the quantity. When you think about it, the quality of the people that's there, that's been ingrained in them before them, and some have came out and it's still after them. So we look at the opportunities we have. We have far more information now to do that, but it's the self-awareness of one. And so I should speak, is the self-awareness one where we have to do this individually, or is this a self-awareness where we can incorporate others to be more self-aware of these pit holes, or these pitfalls, I guess you could say, that we're still not hitting the mark on the targets that we need to. I'm gonna bring up Jeff, and I want to hear what you think about that. But I was reading this article from September 2020 from the Federal News Network, and it was kind of amazing of what was shared in this article as far as the ranking of officers and whatever. And I'm going to share this with you. But Jeff, what do you think on the essence of what I had asked with that? How we making it so these guys in the future that have been, thanks again, Alex. Appreciate it, man. Have a great one, man. How are we making it where that it's available? I know it's available. I know we are making progress. I know there's places to go. I know there's resources to get. But how are we, as leaders, making that available to these people? How are we not necessarily pushing them to, but how are we kind of getting them to say, okay, maybe this is some of the stuff you guys need to engage in?
Well, I think you guys nailed it when you said it's a lot about self-reflection. Diverse relationships are a two-way street. So I think we have to do this as a team effort and not point fingers. Pointing fingers is going to backfire. And we're going to create, like I think Alex said it. Diversity inclusion is a buzzword. We're going to create, a buzzword. So then every time somebody gets appointed to a position, it's going to be questioned. The NFL does a bad job about it because they have that diversity and inclusion policy. And I think it's a good policy, but it backfired because now anytime a minority is considered for a head coaching job, the topic of, well, he might be a minority hire. Well, what does it matter? So then you slapped an unnecessary label on it. And I think that's the problem. What's really the problem with our society is we're slapping labels on stuff. And it's, if I want to hire you, Carl, for a job, I'm just hiring you because of your background and your experience and your knowledge, So, we have to do a really good job of self-reflecting and doing the right things and not necessarily bragging about it. But doing a good job. If you just do a good job, you don't have to say anything. People will tell you you're doing a good job. People will take notice. So I think it's a very fine line to walk, simply because you can ruin it in a heartbeat, with good intentions. And I think Charlson is the one who said it. Self-reflection. We have to look. Every single one of us has to look inside and say, what are we doing? What are we doing? How are we investing? How are we putting equity in this? How are we saying, I could do better at this. I need to adjust that. And I'm doing really good at this. And I need to help others, and I need to help myself.
Yeah, it is. It's funny that you brought that up with the NFL, because that was actually one of my keystones for even thinking about this topic, because they do such a horrendous job. And I met Goodell once. Me and him ran into each other at Chick-fil-A in North Jersey, and I was like, man, first you get over the shock of like who he is and whatever. Just a regular guy. Came in there with another guy, another guy. I think he played football, but I wasn't really sure. I mean, he didn't play football now. I think he probably retired because he just looked like the big football guy. And it might have been just been his bodyguard, but we were waiting for our breakfast. Man, he came in to get a breakfast sandwich. We was waiting for our breakfast, and I didn't want to kind of stare at him, but you look at people like, oh, you get that look like, I think I know you, but maybe I don't know you, but you look familiar. And and I pointed at him, man, and he said, yeah. So I said, yeah, I know you, man. I know you. He told me you was. So we got in a conversation, make a long story short. And I asked him about the hirings, because I think at that time I was living in the Philadelphia area. And we were talking about the Philadelphia team and looking for a coach at that point in time. This was a few years back. And I was like, well, how are we doing things better with the diversity and inclusion and equity and that kind of thing? And we're labeling these hires as, and it's become sort of like a running joke in the NFL. It's like I heard one guy say, with all these coaching fires that got fired over, it's like 9 coaching vacancies right now. And one of the sportscasters was like, yeah, well, they're probably going to look at this hire and they're going to do a diversity Zoom interview with the black candidate and move on. So it's kind of like this, like we put this label on it. Everybody know you ain't really doing it, but you do. Do you think the military has kind of followed this basis with those, like putting the general in and putting the 3, because they did still make it about the individual's race or the minority being the first woman. They still highlighted that instead of the accomplishments. So is our thinking still along those same mental notes?
I think the answer is yes and no.
Okay.
I think yes, because again, we celebrated it like that, as we should. I think it's a great accomplishment, and it should, because you don't know who it's going to reach to. The next generation, or the kid in high school who says, I want to grow up and be an Air Force general. And, then he sees, an African American make it, that can hit motivationally and say, okay, if he can do it, so can I. That's a good, positive, role model, I think. The backfiring to that is, we don't look at the bigger picture and say he was the most qualified. He was absolutely the most qualified. Nobody talks about all the other candidates that were considered that were not, selected. They don't talk about that. And I think that is where we kind of make some of the mistakes, because we don't help justify the decision so that people understand. And I think that's where we've gotten too political. The military has gotten too political, and that needs to be pulled back so that we're just the military. We're just performing at the highest level. We want the best person, the next person up. It doesn't matter who you are. We are looking for the best and most qualified. And I think we haven't done a good job as individuals looking at the whole picture, because there was a situation, I think like a year and a half ago, where, somebody was mad. I knew a couple of chief master sergeants who were upset because they didn't get considered for the Chief Master Sergeant Air Force. But, Chief Bass, who's, minority and a female, was. And she kind of got plucked from, a lower rank. Not a lot of people expected it to happen. And people questioned it. People were like, well, she was the diversity hire. She's a female. First female Chief Master Sergeant Air Force. That's first Chief of Staff of the Air Force that was African American, at the very same time that a Chief Master Sergeant Air Force was a female. And some of the discussions that were had were, was she really qualified? Well, nobody that I had a discussion with talked about her resume. Nobody. Everybody just questioned that part of it. And so what did she do? What was she doing in her current position that made them even consider her in the first place? You're not asking yourself that. We're not having that conversation so that we can say, oh, well, it makes sense. Because when I looked at it, when I looked at her resume and I looked at her background and I looked at her accomplishments and I read some of the things that people said about her, it was a no-brainer. I would have picked her too, even if I didn't have her demographics in front of me. If I just saw her name and her resume, nothing else, no age, no race, no sex, no nothing, I would have picked her too. We're not having that conversation. We're not making common sense of things. We're too focused on the labels.
Yeah, that's you definitely unpacked a lot, man. And I don't want to tab in on Amanda, because she brings about some great points and some great things. She says service members need a common language around D&I. Never been taught in any type of training about what a microaggression or unconscious bias looks or sounds like. That's some awesome information too. She shares here. The military supports D&I on a macro level, which is just what you guys are really talking about, and they're feeling on the micro level. She says some services still don't have an approved strategic plan or strategic communications plan. In the absence of information, first line supervisors and commanders aren't comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. And she says something there that's really, really striking to me. Um, I don't think that they have, well, maybe it could be twofold, and you guys can chime in on this. Let me know what you think. I don't think that they're not, because there's a lot of people that want to have the uncomfortable conversations, but the military and the repercussions from such said conversations can be detrimental to career advancement or even career or even freedom. When you talk about those uncomfortable conversations, right? Because if you're having those conversations with just the first line supervisors or those that are outranking you, at some point in time, if they don't want to continue those conversations, they can shut that down, right? So it's really an unfairness to say that a lot of people may not want to have those conversations, because I knew a lot of people that wanted to have those conversations, and whether they had the tact or the wherewithal, or even the knowledge to articulate them, they wanted to have them, but they were in fear of having them. Not for they didn't feel that they knew what they wanted to say. They was in fear for it because maybe they was a PF4, and they had to make it with a staff sergeant who was, the issue, or maybe it was a master sergeant, and and I'm just a buck sergeant E5. So it was more so along the lines, and not that they didn't want to have the conversations, but what may be the repercussions once I put this out there of how I feel. And I think this is what we really haven't dealt with in the essence of that. So I think it's people that do want to have these talks, and I think it's people that do want to have that area of saying, okay, how can I openly have this conversation with you, and not worrying about you maybe spreading this to someone else in order to get people against me for what I feel. So in the essence of that, that was some of the things, Charlson, you think that we need to work on in the military culture? Those are some of the things that you think are even being addressed.
Well, I love those comments, and honestly, I could give you a 4-hour masterclass on just those comments. But I'll say this about the difficult conversations. So there was a time where I worked in the Air Force headquarters SAPR office, sexual assault prevention and response, and so I taught part of the SARC course, and SARC is a sexual assault response coordinator. And so one of the things that I taught in that course was how to have the difficult conversations. And but the reason for that is because of the way sexual assault victims are treated, right? Because they're a victim of a crime, but there can be retaliation or whatever, right? And so I bring that up because hold on one second here. I bring that up because we don't look at discrimination the same way. We don't look at it as you've been a victim of discrimination. So when we talk about the difficult conversations, it doesn't include the discrimination, right? Because we don't say that there's been a victim of a crime where someone else is like, oh, you're a liar, whatever, whatever. It's not highlighted the same way as sexual assault. And so people are not taught how to have those difficult conversations. I will say this, I had this job before I started this business as an emotional intelligence life coach. I was a violence prevention integrator at this Air Force wing, the 70th ISRW at Fort Meade. And I kind of went rogue and the commanders knew it. And so they brought me in to teach their leaders how to have the difficult conversations. So, and I was teaching about microaggressions. I was teaching about those kinds of things because people didn't know how to have those conversations. So the Air Force came out with this thing where it was mandatory that these organizations have small group discussions or squadron-wide discussions about racism and social justice after the George Floyd incident and all of that stuff, right? And so the commanders were saying, Mr. Gaines, can you help us facilitate this conversation? Because here's a couple of things about it. When you have those difficult conversations, someone can get offended and someone can be hurt. So when you have the E8s, the first sergeant, or when you have a major who is recounting a previous experience and they're breaking down in tears in front of 150 people, they're not prepared for that. They're not prepared for that. And so that's why I was in those discussions, because I was able to bring it back. I was able to say, like, for example, there's one major that applied for this job, and she was told that her resume looked very similar to this other individual. Very similar. So the reason the other guy was selected instead of her was because she didn't look the part. She didn't look like the kind of person that can handle that position. And she's breaking down, crying about it. And so then I was able to bring it back by saying, I understand that. I understand that I was painful for you, and clearly you were done wrong. However, I appreciate you continuing to be your authentic self, and the impact that you're having right now in this conversation in front of 150 people in your squadron would not have happened if you got that job. And so I was able to have that conversation with her. I was able to talk about microaggressions. There was another time where I put in 2 troops for below the zone. In the Air Force, below the zone, you get promoted 6 months early. And one individual got the stripe, the other didn't. And the individual who did not get the stripe says to me, so there were like 4 of them every quarter, and in this quarter, all 4 of them were women. And he said, I think the wing is trying to send a message. Why is it all women? Why did this person get it and not me? And so I was able to have that conversation and say, let's pull up your package and compare it to hers. And because I wrote both of those packages. And I said, let's just go line by line. Now, looking at these, try to take your mind out of whose package goes to who, because your name is on one of them. Looking at these individual accomplishments, who would you have chosen? And he was like, yeah, I would have picked her. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Why is it that you never ask this question when it's 4 white men who get those stripes? And what happened was he was like, wow, I didn't think about it like that. And the reason I was able to have those conversations with these people is because I lead with empathy. These people know that I care about them. They know my character. They know that I'm coming from a place where I want us all to be okay. And so when you lead with empathy and when you have those real connections, then it's easier. It's easier to say that. You know, like there are things that Carl could say to me right now. At some stranger, I wouldn't be as open to it from someone else. And so leaders have to first build those relationships. And it makes the difficult conversations easier because when you do that, you create a safe space. I need the airman. I need the private. I need the second lieutenant to be able to go up to the major and say, when you said this, that hurt because that is a microaggression that I've heard over and over. In which the major may reply, I didn't realize you took it that way. What makes that a microaggression? The major has to create the safe space for the conversation. And you create safe spaces with empathy, and that is not taught to leaders.
Well, and I think, and to your point, a big part of it is having the vulnerability and the trustworthiness to open your perspective up. Because we all have a perspective. And a lot of times, you know, my perspective, you know, at times has taught me a lesson. And whereas, you know, I've said something that I didn't say with ill will, but somebody came up to me later and said, you know, the way you said it, I'm not being mad, but the way you said it, it came across to me like this. And it was like, oh, okay. Well, why? You know, and it taught me to maybe open up my perspective a little bit because, you know, you have a good perspective, you have it with good intentions, but maybe it's just not wide enough to encompass everything. And that's really, really hard to do. But I think leaders, when you're building that relationship with your people, I think you have to be able to do that. And you have to be able to do that with them to say, let's open up the perspective here. Let me compare you to your peers so you can see why I'm saying, you know, you are here. These are the things you need to do, but these are the things you're doing well. So when we're putting people up for awards, promotion considerations, and things like that, we're basing it on performance. You know where you stand. That's something I always did. When I gave people honest feedback, I told them honestly, but I always asked them, all right, you don't get the official chance to evaluate me and rate me. I'm giving you that chance to do so. Because if I'm going to tell you out of a 5-point scale with 5 being the best, you're a 3, I want to know why you're a 3 from your perspective. Because a lot of times they'll say things like, well, I didn't feel like I was given chances to do certain things. Or I felt like the training wasn't very good. Well, we've been training all year. Why didn't you say something? That's not the point. The point is, you know, they kept it inside. They just didn't have the courage to speak, and that's okay. I need you. If I'm going to evaluate you, you need to have a chance to evaluate me, even if it's a one-on-one private conversation, so that we can grow our perspectives and we can grow together. I've taken some very fantastic, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I had some airmen that were labeled. I was given to them. They were given to me and they were labeled as dirtbags. Wow. And with the right mentoring and the right leadership, they're rock stars. They're absolute rock stars. There's several of them that I had when I was an instructor that are they're future chiefs and future generals. I mean, I've already been watching their career progress, and I haven't mentioned color, background, race, anything like that. Doesn't matter because it's all about taking an individual and giving them what they need. So unselfish leadership. You've got to find a way of having those uncomfortable conversations, making them comfortable, and then making them productive for both sides of the equation. Because you can tell somebody all day long, hey, you need to work on these things. But until you give them the tools to do so, some of them might not find the courage to work, So you as a leader, and that was something always really, really important to me, is when it comes time to give somebody feedback on their performance, I give them honest feedback, but then I always ask them, what can I do to be better to help you do better? Whether I was giving you a 5, you're an outstanding performer, or I was giving you a 1 where you need a whole lot of work. We gotta do it together. We either have to take the next step or we have to progress together. And I don't think we're having those unbiased, honest conversations well because we're scared of them.
Yeah, and it's that scaredness, and you guys make me also points when you go into that scaredness of the dialogue. A lot of time the dialogue isn't happening, and I guess you could kind of like make this a circumference of a circle of not necessarily excuses but facts, right? The dialogue is not taking place because the culture doesn't allow it. The culture doesn't allow it because the systemic problem of whatever has been there has turned that tradition into a way that we do things. So when I tell people a lot of times when I go into these offices and I talk to these different leaders, most of the times when I'm going to do a training or whatever, unless it's a tribal one, I like to come and look at the place of work without me engaging. Oftentimes when I get appointments to do, or I'm going to a place to do a training or doing a workshop or doing a speaking engagement, I go a day early. I don't tell anybody I'm coming, and I don't inform anybody that I am who I am. I just go there early. I may engage with the receptionist, ask her a few questions like, "What do you guys really do? Like, what's just stupidity questions is what I call them. Because if you work at a company and you the head person, the reception is the gatekeeper. So she should be informed, not necessarily about all the ins and the isms and schisms, but if I come through that door, she should be able to tell me everything that this company's supposed to be doing or what it was incorporated to do, right? They don't have the culture. The culture doesn't allow for the conversations to take place because the culture is not safe. So when talking about this military culture and this being the backdrop of our conversation and even the backdrop of this show, how can we address that culture where these conversations can be ad hominem all the time? And we don't have to pick out or place in separate segregated spots or opportunities for these conversations to come. These conversations to be circumstanced. They should be, I'm not feeling this way and I'm not doing this way. And I'm not saying that we have the answers. I know we have ideas toward that, and I know that we are in our own individual rights are working toward that. The military culture is such a great monster, right? So there's a lot of moving parts that have to be on the same train in order for it to go forward. And that I do know. But what do you guys think? What are some of the longer term steps that we know these individuals, the micromanagements of, the macro managements of, these kind of things that you guys have highlighted where conversations need to take place, how the uncomfortable needs to be comfortable. Well, what are some of the things in the leadership of the culture can be directly changed in a step by step basis to say, these are some of the things we need to be doing first in order for these conversations to be comfortably had all the time?
I think we got to invest time in training. You know, you're never going to get good at something unless you practice at it. You know, so I think having more opportunities to talk and train is how you get better at things. You know, and it has to be, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be scheduled, but I mean, scheduled routine training that people can look forward to and bring good conversations, I think is the way to get back to it, you know, and, you know, in the military, we do a lot of training, but sometimes we do training just to check the box. And I think we've gotten away from doing training because it matters. And you know, we kind of brought up the George Floyd thing, and the problem we have in society is we put such a focus on action, and we don't ask us how we got there, and we don't ask us if we did a good enough job getting there. And a lot of that is training and teaching and education, and it goes both ways, and something big for police officers and military, fire departments, all those kind of combative type of jobs. You have to train to be proficient, so if you're not investing in that as a police department, as a military, as a fire department, as medical personnel, if you don't practice your craft, how are you going to be good at it? So I think you have to go back to that and say, if we want to be at our perform at our highest levels, what are we doing to do that? What are we doing? Because you can't sit there and say, well, I'm a great leader when you don't practice being a leader. I'm a good manager, I'm a good accountant when you don't practice doing it. If it's a small part of your job and you allocate a small part of your time, it's going to have small results. So if you want to have honest conversations, you got to have them more often. And they're going to be uncomfortable until people trust you, until people understand you, until you understand your culture and your environment. And that's hard with the military because people change all the time. But you can't use that as an excuse. I don't care if you're here for 3 months or 3 years. It starts on day one. Honest feedback and honest conversations, and building people. Because, again, you got to focus on training. You have to invest the time. If you're not investing the time, you're not going to get results. And then if you don't invest the time, you can't complain about it.
And so I remember my dad telling me that when I get thinking when he was preparing me to vote. He's like, if you don't vote, you can't complain about who's in office, because you didn't partake of your liberties of trying to put somebody there. So if something is wrong, you say, I don't want to hear you complain about it. Charlson, what are some of the longer term steps, man? You think that in us closing this out? I mentioned this right quickly before I give you an opportunity to say that, man, because Amanda, we appreciate you chiming in and joining in discussions. You brought along some great points and some things we'll definitely be taking notice to. The bottom part of this, you talked about the Air Force, that the diversity and inclusion needs to be added as a fourth core value. But I think the latter part of this sentence is what all cultures should be adding. I think we've got too much in the separation of fact and like setting this aside, like this is a certain thing. I think this should be ingratiated as a part of a corporate level training or culture training. And she says that D&I needs to be part of everything the services do. So it's not viewed as this separate topic. And I think when it's put aside as a separate topic, that kind of lends those in leadership to say, is that important? Versus it kind of give you an option to say, I know we need that, but over here is more important. You going out here and learning how to shoot this 45 is more important than you learning about, you know what I'm saying? It kind of gives us an option to say, well, I could put that further along the totem pole. But what are some of the steps you think you're taking there in Charleston toward some longer term solutions toward this diversity and inclusion, where we can kind of work on this, where, as Jeff said, those uncomfortable conversations can become just the normal conversations that we have with each other based upon how we interact with each other.
Well, I think I mean, training was mentioned, and there's a comment by Carla talking about early years of intuitive language development, and I absolutely love that, because I think about, when I hear early years of intuitive language development, I think about people actually learning the military language in basic training.
Yeah.
Because we have a whole separate set of concepts in the way that we think, right? But at the same time, also keep in mind that over 80% of the people that join the military have had an immediate family member also in the military. I'm an example. My dad was in the Army for 20 years, and my son is in basic training right now. So, but I will say this, that when we talk about training, it's not about training diversity and inclusion for me. Like that's not the end point, right? For example, look at sports. Before I can teach you about our playbook in football, what has to happen? You have to go through the conditioning. Can you even handle a practice? And so for me, a diversity and inclusion equivalent is emotional intelligence, vulnerability, and accountability. Am I bringing those things to all of these situations? Because that also keeps you from making the big mistakes, right? And I'll give you an example of that. We were having in the 70th, everyone's having their like squadron or group picnics and this and that, right? And I think this was in 2019. And there's a squadron commander he's white. He's first generation immigrant from Germany. His parents were German. And at his squadron's function, he wore a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And his thing was, I'm a first generation immigrant and I want you to appreciate my German culture. We should include everyone. And so his message was to wear that Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And the thing about it is, there's so many people in the unit who really don't know him, right? I mean, that's how it is for a commander when you have 300 something people in your squadron. There's people that don't know you. So a lot of people got the wrong message. A lot of people got the wrong message. They took it the wrong way. They were very offended by it. And it was like, if we took it back to vulnerability and accountability, maybe instead of wearing that t-shirt that day or prior to wearing that t-shirt, he could have had a conversation, a difficult conversation, like talking to some leaders, some people at the mid-level manager and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. How will your people react? But see, that's a difficult conversation because commanders don't want E6s to hold them accountable.
Yeah. That's solid. That's solid, man, because that's absolutely true because they're going to take it the wrong way and they're going to hear things the wrong way. And when you're voicing yourself up, and you're, so to speak, looking down and you're asking your people, hey, what do you think about this? And then you don't hear the answers that you necessarily wanted to hear or expected to hear. How are you taking that? Because if I said, yeah, I want to wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt and they were like, hey, boss, that's probably a bad idea. Here's why. Yeah. You haven't had the conversations to justify that. You're going to just split the entire squadron.
Yeah, and that
we need to have conversations, and then you won't even have to wear the t-shirt. Yeah. People will just know. Exactly. And we're not, and that's why when I was a boss, every time I've been a boss, I've always asked, you give me feedback even if it hurts my feelings, because I gotta know. I have to know.
And that goes back to the emotional intelligence, specifically self-awareness. If you tell me that's like, boss, that's a dumb idea. If I'm offended by that, self-awareness lets me think about, why am I offended? Am I offended because the 20-year-old brand new to the unit told me that? Well, could that be an example of implicit bias based on age? So it's self-awareness. Why am I so bothered by getting the honest truth by people of this rank or this age or this demographic?
Yeah, I think you got to you got to say, this is just business. If I present an idea to you and you say that's a dumb idea, here's why, I have to say, okay. To me, it's a great idea because I came up with it. But to you, you're justifying why it's a dumb idea. I can't take it personal. I just have to. It's hard. It's easier said than done, but you have to condition yourself to go, okay. Well, but then my question to you would be, okay, what would you suggest? If my idea was dumb, what do you think? Yeah. Because then you're putting ownership into the process with people. And you're not just allowing somebody to tell you that your idea is dumb, or you're not telling somebody that the idea is dumb. Okay, if that won't work, what would? Give me some ideas. Let's start throwing some darts at the wall, because we're not going to get anywhere by saying, hey, that's a dumb idea, So, you have to take the bias out of it. You have to sit there and say, I'm just going to throw an idea out there. If it don't work, it don't work.
And I'll give you an example of that where it's because what you're saying is how we build real relationships.
Right.
I'm going to give you an example of that actually has nothing to do with diversity and inclusion. But when I was in this organization, they came up with a flight coin, and there was a list of things you had to do to earn it. A lot of people didn't like it, and the boss said, I came up with this idea. I thought it was a great idea. I've heard from people that we don't like it, so I'm changing it. And everyone was like, wow, we can talk to him. He listens.
Yeah. That's such a huge win as for a leader, because the smallest decision can have the biggest impact. Like just the acknowledgement of it. That's all he did, was just the acknowledgement. Then there needs to be a change. Massive. So that's another thing about leaders, is they don't realize that you don't have to make these big grand decisions. You can make a small decision and have a maximum impact.
I was going to tap on that, Jeff. You got to get it to down my mouth, because that's how we there, man. We
Yeah,
there,
man, we're there.
because it's such an emphasis on what we all do, that we try to bring the enlightenment to the leaders, that uh, we take on that title as such as us taking on the world, and they don't really equate to each other. It's the smallest things that we could do as leaders that will really produce us the greatest results, and we bypass those opportunities at every single chance, because we want to be like my mom used to tell me when I was coming up. She's like, if you read the assignment and understand that you're already deep. She said a lot of people will try to go deep to make you think they know. But she said if you read what you're supposed to be doing and comprehend it, and we were talking about books, and I think I was talking, I'm a little jealous, but I was kind of like, because I thought I was always like a little head and smart, and I was able to pick up stuff and comprehend. So of course, as you go through school, you run through somebody that's gonna be smarter than you, and I had just been at a level of just like, and I even skipped a grade, so I'd have been like, I know I'm ahead of people. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't necessarily say it was a cockiness, but it was a wherewithal that I knew. And I got to the eighth grade, and I had skipped the sixth grade, and I jumped to seventh, and I got to eighth grade. And I in eighth grade, and the whole concept of thinking was different. And this this younger kid sprouted out some stuff and got to talking, man. I was like, oh, I do think he's smart, right? So, and I said mine, and the inferior part of me, or the part that, you know, thought I wasn't enough, I kind of like, oh man, he did start smart. So I kind of took that on as like a, this kid's smarter than me kind of thing. And that went on for the majority of the eighth grade. That's how I took it. But I had to talk with my mom sort that on the assignment I had one night. And she was like, well, what's the problem? And I said, this kid, I'll never forget his name, Jermaine. I said, Jermaine gets in school, he just talks and he just says stuff, and he just sounds so deep, right? It just sounds like he just knows everything. And my mom was like, she's like, you know how you could be deep. And I'm thinking of this great wisdom that this woman is about to share with me, and tell me how, what's the secret. She said, if you read the information and you comprehend it, she said, you're deeper than anybody else. And she said, all you got to do is read it and comprehend and understand what it's asking you. And she said that he just knows how to articulate words and talk about things, but it doesn't make him any deeper than you. And it took those kind of things. And this is what I try to really put on a scale for leaders to see. That people that you're leading, not looking for you to be, I know it may be what some people don't think, but most people that are being led, they look to see their leader being someone that first and foremost they can have conversations with, that they can relate to, and that they can actually work together to accomplish things for that corporation, for that job, for that project, whatever it is. But people are not really looking for leaders to just take them out and just hold their hands and just walk them down the road, right? When you think of leaders, you're looking for this opportunity to say, "Oh, I know a little bit because you hired me, right? You know a little bit because you're leading us. How about if we put that together and let's formulate this greatness that we can be?" And I think leaders miss that point. They miss that point. Oh man, this conversation's been good, man. We talked an hour, man. I'm loving this, man. I'm loving how we're carrying it, man. I'm loving how we're doing, man. I appreciate everybody that's come to. Amanda, you brought so much to the conversation. Carla, you as well. Appreciate you. Carla's like, I gotta hook you and Carla up, Charlson. You guys are on that emotional intelligence kind of like genius kind of level, man. She talks about some things, man. It's like I'm like, wow, like I don't too many people wow me, but she does in conversations, man. So we definitely got to hook you guys up and get you guys on. As always, guys, let us know what you're doing. Charlson, hit us up, man. I'm gonna put your links up and just run through, man, what you got going on and what you're offering, and how can people connect with you as well, my friend.
Well, I just started I want to say this new level of my podcast, right? So
Oh, okay.
my podcast since last summer has been just me audio.
Okay.
But I've added another layer to it where on Fridays I go live interviewing someone else. And so last Friday was my first one, and
Awesome.
it was a friend of mine that I've known for a while, and really it's about resilience, how you endured something and how you bounce back. And her focus was the death of her son. He's 23 years old, passed away. It'll be a year next week. And then, so this Friday, and I'm gonna put the link up on my LinkedIn here shortly. But this Friday, I have a guy who is a former Navy intelligence officer talking about the abuse that he endured as a child. And so I'm excited about that. This new level of my podcast that is going to be live every Friday on LinkedIn. So join me for that. And
I know we
man,
got your membership thing too, right?
yeah, definitely. But I'm still working on that.
Working on
You
that.
know, like so currently that I have a couple of on-demand courses in there already. But I really think that when people watch this podcast and you hear other people's stories, because I have a lot of friends, we all do, right? A lot of friends that have been through a lot of stuff. We honestly do not know the total number of suicide attempts of our friends. And so I'm bringing that to the forefront so people can see that we've all been through it, man.
Yeah, it is true, man. All right, Jeff, man, let us know where we can catch you at Mr. Arthur, the Arthur Debonair, man. We still got to get together, man, so you can help me get my book out, man.
Yep.
I think I'm definitely use you to help
You
me get
better you better punch that ticket, man. I'm here to help. Yeah, man. So I'm hoping to have the cover to the book this week that I can
Awesome,
announce
man.
very
Awesome.
very soon. That's what I'm told from the publishers that I'll have it this
Okay.
week. It's Wednesday, so I guess we'll see. But new episodes of my podcast, Course of Action, are starting now. I just had George Randall from the
Yes,
Talent War Group
wonderful
on.
episode. I listened to it. Wonderful, man.
Thank you. It was a great conversation.
Yes.
But Monday, I have Michelle Black, Gold Star spouse and author of Sacrifice.
Oh,
Her
awesome.
husband was
Awesome.
in ODA 3212 over in Nigeria when they got ambushed. And she
Wow.
has a remarkable story. Her book is awesome. And she was an absolute outstanding interview. So I'm real excited for Monday's podcast because it's one that I recorded back in December and I've just been waiting to put out.
Okay.
And Michelle Black on Monday and Course of Action podcast. That's what's going on.
Definitely have to check that out, man. Definitely, man. You guys are rolling on, man. And you guys can find me here, man. I stay on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is fun. LinkedIn is my job. As someone told me, LinkedIn is my job. I had three shows that I do. The Real Talk. I'm on 3 days a week. 4 days a week, actually. I didn't even think about that. Right, Monday, get my authentic leadership with the lovely Tracy Morrison, where we do authentic leadership 101. We kind of take you to class on some leadership topics, how to be authentic, what authentic looks like to you. That's at 5 p.m. on Mondays. Also part of Business Peeps community that we have, the Impact membership, which is a mastermind that we do 6 to 7. That's in that community. So that's the link. I'm going to put that in there if you want to join that community. We meet every Monday after the live show, and we just discuss from all industries, man. We got people in there in everything, manufacturing, shipping, like everything. And we just got a bunch of leaders that are kind of like putting their obstacles out there and just being open and vulnerable about discussing different perspectives of how maybe we can help them solve issues. Yeah. So we got some accountants there, we got some lawyers in there, we got different mixture of people, but we're talking about how they look at other people's obstacles. And I just thought it was a broad thing to get some minds together from different perspectives and see who understands you more than you think they do. Because I think sometimes we have, if I'm an attorney, I got a problem, I got to go talk to another lawyer. Yeah, maybe specifically in those laws, but perspective-wise, to see how people handle things, you'd be surprised. It's a wealth of knowledge that we leave on the table that people can help us with. So you guys can join there. And there's also, I have my next class is beginning on February the 7th, a vulnerability transformation program. It's a 4-week intensive, man, where we just cover my 4 steps for you to overcome your self-limiting beliefs and your fear of vulnerability and lead through vulnerability, not with vulnerability, not being vulnerable, but lead through vulnerability. There's a big difference, and I go through that in that. So you guys can reach us here, and we're here, all 3 of us, every Wednesday. We'd like to thank Alex as well. He hopped on for a little bit of us, and he had to leave because he's full force Air Force all the time. So he had to jump off and do some things, man. But you guys, appreciate each and every one of you guys that came by. Thanks again, Jeff. Thanks again, Charlson. And I guess we'll see you guys on next week. You guys come and check us out 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on the Addressing Military Culture podcast. Yes, that's a podcast with us being visible. Yeah, how you like that, right? So we see you guys on the next time. Have a great one.